Aloha aina, ano ai, velina kako. Welcome to Free Hawaii News, brought to you by the Koani Foundation, presenting Hawaiian perspectives on a broad range of topics and issues affecting the Hawaiian Islands, the Pacific, and the world. Your hosts for Free Hawaii News are Leon Kaulahau-Siu, musician, composer, diplomat, and political analyst, and Hinaleimoana Wong, Kumu filmmaker, cultural and Hawaiian language preservationist, and community leader. And now, Free Hawaii News.
Ano ai me ke aloha ia kākou a pauloa e ko Hawaii nei pai aina puni mahalo anu I ke hui ana o wau no o kumuhina.
And my name is Leon Kaulahau-Siu, and it's our pleasure to welcome you here to Free Hawaii News.
An exciting theatrical debut has come to Hawaii, the world premiere of a new opera titled Kamalehua, The Sheltering Tree. Set in the mid-19th century, the opera reveals the history of the Hawaiian kingdom and its early struggles to maintain its independence. Kamalehua, The Sheltering Tree, is the first Hawaiian language opera depicting history through the lens of Oiwi, through the native Hawaiian worldview. The opera's director and choreographer is Patriot, a visionary kumu hula who has been pushing the boundaries of traditional hula since founding his San Francisco-based dance company, Nālei Hulu Ikavekiu, in 1985. In 2023, he was named a MacArthur Fellow, becoming the first native Hawaiian to receive this prestigious Genius Grant. His performances regularly challenge stereotypes and explore past and present day threats to Native Hawaiian people and culture, including the history of colonialism. We go now to San Francisco, where he is standing by. Aloha mai ka'aua, kumu Patrick.
Aloha e Hina, it's great to be here.
This story about Timoteo Ha'alilio, why is his story so compelling and so moving to you? And tell us, what made you engage Timoteo Ha'alilio?
I've always found this story fascinating. After a friend of mine, Kauisai Dudois, a historian, told me all about it. And it's one of those stories about our history that many Hawaiians don't even know about. This journey of this man who went all over to the United States, France, England, to secure Hawaii's status as an independent sovereign nation is really a fascinating, compelling story. And the sad part was that he literally gave his life for his nation and his people, because after the journey was completed, after all that hard, arduous work, he came back on the ship to head home, and unfortunately he died on the way home. Can you imagine? I mean, the kaumaha. So there's so many different elements to this story that's really wonderful and eye-opening, and every Hawaiian should know this man's story.
Timoteo Ha'alilio was almost single-handedly responsible for the major world powers at that time to recognize Hawaii as a sophisticated nation with an established government. And I want to know, what are your thoughts? Is this topic actually bringing to us Kanaka at this time a message that we should be considering? Is this something that is going to prompt us to think about our future?
When I think of what a patriot truly means, and I look at the examples of Timoteo Ha'alilio, love of country, love and respect for Aina and for King and for the Lahui, that's something that we can all look to today and understand what it means, how we should act as a patriot. You know, our love for, and we, as Hawaiians today, we speak a lot about that, right? Our love for the Lahui. So what does that mean? How do we back that up when we say that? In this opera, one of the lines that consistently is repeated is "Ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono." We've read that in history books our entire life growing up in Hawaii, right? And we've seen it in stage plays and heard people say it. But there is something incredibly powerful and stirring when you hear a character who is portraying the man who invented that phrase. When it's sung so gloriously and so magnificently, it's like, okay, now I really get what that means. You know, especially in context of what happened during that time.
This opera is sung predominantly in our mother tongue, in Olelo Kanaka. How difficult was the cast? How difficult was it for the cast to do this?
Well, that's a great question because, well, first of all, the lead character is sung by Quinn Kelsey, who is this world-renowned baritone, and he's a Kamehameha School graduate. So he's, you know, he already understands how to speak Hawaiian, so I don't think it was much of a challenge for him. But for everybody else, especially the guy who plays Kawi Kiaoli, as an opera singer, professional opera singers, they're accustomed to singing many languages, French, German, Italian, you know. So it's not too much of a stretch for them in those languages. But the guy who's playing Kawi Kiaoli told me that this was by far the hardest for him to get down. And let me tell you, he has to sing passages and passages in Hawaiian. And there are Hawaiian language experts at rehearsal every night who give him notes. Oh, you know, your glide from the A to the U, da, 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 da. The broad A on that lahui was not too good. You got to remember to. I don't know how he does it. I mean, I will never, ever let any of my students complain about memorizing a chant. Because this guy who doesn't even speak Hawaiian, and he's doing such a fantastic job. You would be so proud how he glides, how he shapes the okinas. I mean, it's really beautiful, but we are on their okoles to ensure that this is pronounced correctly. It's a lot of work, and the admiration I have for them to ensure that this is done correctly is like, I'm like in awe. When you hear them speaking as an ali'i, and if the voice is just so pure and so powerful as these players, it's another way of like connecting with them that's different from anything we've ever done. So I'm always just like, you know, every time he walks around, I just want to do aloha, you know, because the range and power that he has as Kawi Kiaoli representing him is, I think, something that even Kawi Kiaoli would be happy to know that somebody like that is portraying. Joshua Jeremiah is playing Rikeke Richards, who accompanied Ha'alilio on this trip. And so their relationship is important because they were together the entire time. And he is phenomenal. He's a great singer. And more importantly, his voice with Quinn Kelsey, who plays Ha'alilio, it's just magnificent. The pairing of them is great. We also have Tasha Kuntz, who is a native Hawaiian gal, who is an excellent singer, and she brings such gravitas to the role of Hana, that's Ha'alilio's wife. There's a 40-member chorus, 40 people in the chorus. That's quite a lot. And, you know, they're volunteering, and they have to memorize like 12 different songs, all in Hawaiian. You know, lucky I could do that with my students for a show that I have 6. So I'm really impressed at the level of commitment and discipline that everyone is committing to this project.
As both director and choreographer for this project, how have you been transformed by this work?
That's a great question, because one of the things I learned early on when I stepped into preparing for this a couple of weeks ago, director and choreographer is not the same as being the Kumu. You know, as a Kumu, you have the last word on everything. And I'm kind of ma'a to that, I have to say. But as a director and choreographer, you don't. You need to speak to everyone, and it's a collaborative sort of answer. So that was a little eye-opening, shall we say, because let's say you're doing a show and you want to change the song. You want to change the ha'ina. You want to take a verse out. You want to add a verse in. Guitar, bass, ukulele, easy to do that. You just talk to the musician. Well, you can't do that for an opera because it's a score. There's orchestration, and it's written, and everybody in the orchestra already has a score. They're ma'a to that. So it's like changing something is possible, but it takes it's a huge amount of work. So I learned that. So I had to be very sort of judicious in what I asked for in terms of changing things. To be able to tell a story like this, to direct it and to choreograph it feels like a kuleana that is, you know, I better get this right or else. I feel a kuleana not only to tell their story right for our ali'i and for this man and for the dear friend who told me all about it, and to all of us, to ensure that people are proud when they watch this, and then trying to manage my own expectations as to the chorus is a 40-member chorus, like I mentioned, and some of them are dancing, but they're not really my halau because who's accustomed to how I work. So I had to bring 5 of my own dancers from San Francisco so that we can really do the dancing the way that it needs to be to express the story properly from my perspective. So dealing with limitations, but yet try not to let that limit you. And working with people's talent level that might not be up to where you want, but then you figure out how to make it work and you bring in other elements to, it's just been a really fantastic process. And to be honest, I'm telling everybody, I've never worked so hard in my life because we're on a schedule, right? It's 1 month. You have 1 month with everybody to put this thing together. 1 month to do an opera with orchestration, singing. And the singing is really important. You're spending time on that. And then maneuvering everyone on stage. It's like, wow, we're on 2 to 10 every day. And on Saturdays, it's like, whoo, daddy is worn out, but in the very best of ways.
What do you want the audience to take away from seeing Kamalehua?
What I want the audience to take away is to really understand the rich history that we have and the many people who played a part, especially during that time of the 1840s with all that gunboat diplomacy, as all these major nations circling us with their ships and power. It was a really frightening time for our people, especially the king. He recognized that something needed to be done. And this 2-year journey, which really was an impossible task, I'm wondering, like, how many of them thought that they could actually make it happen, but they had to try something. And then it succeeded. It succeeded beyond everyone's expectations. Hawaii was recognized by these great nations. Hawaii was the first non-European country to be admitted into the family of nations. They enjoyed over 90 treaties with countries all over the world recognizing their independence. That is a feat that is just insurmountable, but they managed it. So we have it in our DNA and our genealogy to surmount things that we think are really difficult. All we have to do is just look at our kupuna, and we can look to this guy to understand what it really means to uphold the principles of your lahui, of aloha aina, and just really, really a really magnificent way to honor him. I promise you that everyone who sees it, but especially if you are Native Hawaiian, you will come away from this show feeling a sense of pride and aloha that is unique.
Not only am I excited to see it, but I'm truly grateful that you are bringing it to us. I am absolutely positive that this is the absolute best timing for this production, Kamalehua, the Sheltering Tree. We come now once again to one of our favorite times of the show, and this is where Leon and I get to discuss the Pacific Way. Today, Leon, I really want us to take a few minutes out and to share our thoughts about this understanding of food sovereignty and what it means for us to be able to sustain ourselves by virtue of what we can provide and grow for ourselves here in Hawaii. Now, in our language, we have the term aina momona, and we see accounts of this in our history, in historical writing, and aina momona literally translates into a fat land, a rich land. Aina momona, now to me, when I hear this, I can see fields of loʻikalo, or fields of dry land kalo, uwala, uhi. There's groves of ulu, yes, and even maia. But at different points along the way, our community was actually almost forced away from this. What are your thoughts on food sovereignty?
Well, this is really interesting because when we talk about sovereignty, we usually think about political sovereignty.
Yes.
But the more important thing are the things like food sovereignty and housing, you know, how do we house? So I think that's an excellent thing, particularly food. The way Hawaii is structured now, we depend on the importation of 85 to 90% of our food that we consume.
Absolutely.
So yes, so we do eat some local foods, but really the bulk of the foods we eat are imported, and much of it is not really healthy for us.
Yes.
So we not only are eating 90% of food imported, but it's also ruining our health.
Absolutely.
And so it's really critical that we return back to eating the foods that our forefathers ate here, the ones that came on the canoes, and in which our people thrived, and not only to eat those foods, but to really because these are the foods of the land. The land, Aina,
Yes.
is what feeds us. Yeah, the land that feeds us, and so when we eat from our land, we are actually ingesting Hawaii
Yes.
into our bodies. And so this is very important, and it may sound like it's kind of a too much of a spiritual or a reach, but it actually is true that you are what you eat.
Yes.
And if you're eating chemicals being imported from DuPont or somebody like that, then that's what you turn into. You know, I mean, it greatly affects us. So I think that we need to get back to eating now. The problem, of course, we have is how do we do it with much of our land having been cordoned off for other uses, military in particular.
Yes.
Big parts of our arable land is being used by the military, but also development and housing projects and things like that. So, but the good thing is that with the failure of the big mono-agricultural crops like sugar and pineapple, it has actually released hundreds of thousands of acres that could be recaptured and re-put into production. It's going to take a lot of work because there's a lot of contamination in that soil.
Yes.
And but it is there and it's ready for us to use. So the only thing that's lacking is the political will.
Yes.
Of the government and our people to do something about it. The good thing is that there are a lot of young Kanaka who have risen to the call and are moving forward toward becoming much more independent with our food. And then this other thing, when we talk about independence, you know, dependency is something we don't want, but that is, of course, much of what we bring in from outside makes us dependent on the shipping and as well as the goods that come from outside. And not just food, but our energy. Everything comes from outside. Not almost everything. So we're beginning to make some changes here. And at least the thought process is there that we need to become more independent in supporting ourselves, so that if a ship or if a crisis happens and the shipping stops, you know, we only have 11 days of food at any given time on our islands to feed everybody. So we are in a real crisis right now. We have to anticipate that shipping is not going to always be there. And we've had some signals of it. You know, when the 9/11 attack happened in New York City, well, all the transportation stopped from the United States. And then there have been other crises. There have been dock strikes and things like that. And it puts Hawaii, the people of Hawaii, into such jeopardy because we're 2 weeks away from being panicking into starting starvation at that point. So we really need to do something about this.
I absolutely agree, and in fact, when I think about it, as our viewers always hear me say, Hawaii is my mainland. Hawaii is my piko. Hawaii is my motherland and my homeland. Imagine if our people would really understand what are some of the intimacies that come with holding to this particular viewpoint. If, in math equation, if then, it's a logical equation. If Hawaii is my mainland, then logically I should look to Hawaii, my mainland, for where my food should rightfully come from. Imagine a Hawaii that actually reinstated the production of our fish ponds to what they should rightfully be.
Yes.
Fish and the foods of the land, we can't go wrong. But what it's going to take is for our viewers out there to understand that Hawaii is completely capable of doing this. And even those of our island people, as well as others, they may not necessarily see themselves in the place right now to be that leader. But it doesn't take that much effort to simply make the mental switch. But it starts by having Hawaii in your heart, in your spirit, in your mind, as the place that we should be putting ourselves into, and that can put itself back into us. And so, again, for food sovereignty, and when we think of the words of our kupuna, Aina Momona, a fat and rich land.
You're watching Free Hawaii News, giving you the Kanaka perspective on issues in Hawaii.
Artificial intelligence is reshaping human culture at a pace that outstrips our ability to fully grasp its consequences. As AI systems increasingly generate art, music, language, and other aspects, many indigenous cultures are asking questions about the short and long-term ramifications of AI to their cultures, and the Kanaka Maoli or Hawaiian culture is no different. One of those asking these important questions on behalf of Kanaka Maoli is Kumu Michelle Manu. Michelle recently published a groundbreaking article on Substack titled, "Kumu are not content creators, custody, not content." Her article is a kahea, or call for integrity, in Hawaiian sacred transmissions in the face of encroaching artificial intelligence. Dr. Kumu Michelle Manu, PhD and JD, is an elite athlete, metaphysician, master of martial arts, and educator. She is also involved in integrating ancient knowledge to unlock and activate human potential, and we are honored to have her join us now. Aloha and welcome, Michelle.
Aloha, Leon. Thank you for having me on Free Hawaii News.
In your Substack article, you asked, how do we live, teach, and transmit sacred knowledge in an age of artificial intelligence, synthetic media, and accelerated visibility without losing the kahua, the foundation or base that makes our traditions real? Can you explain to us what you mean by that?
What I mean is this: sacred Hawaiian traditions were never built on visibility. They were built on relationship, discipline, ceremony, consequence, and direct transmission from one trained body to another, and that is kahua. So today we live in a world where everything is expected to be fast, visible, digital, and constantly shared. But sacred knowledge does not become more valuable because it becomes more visible, and sometimes it becomes weaker. So my question is to those Kumu, how do we use modern tools without allowing those tools to erode the very foundations that make our traditions authentic? Because once we replace lived transmission with performance, convenience, or spectacle, we may still have imagery, but we no longer have the real thing.
AI can generate all kinds of images and simulate voices and assemble narratives that can look convincing, but it cannot carry lineage. Why does that distinction matter?
Lineage is not just information. Lineage is responsibility. It's what's stored in our koko. It's what's said with our leo, our voice, what pumps through our blood. And, the koko and the bones, we hold this in our bones. Lineage is the weight of who taught you, who came before you, how you were corrected, what disciplines you underwent, what protocols you carry, and what consequences come with misuse of that information. So AI can imitate appearance, but it cannot inherit accountability. I was recently offered an opportunity to film all of my Lua movements and input them into AI, so a digital double of me, an avatar, could be made. I was promised the ability to lessen my time, make more time for my life to write or do whatever else that I wanted to do. It could teach for me. It could appear in my place. It could give keynote addresses. And I declined. Why? Because my haumana would not know whether they were learning from me or from a simulation of me. The confusion is dangerous. My teachings are not separate from my body, my breath, my judgment, and my spiritual obligations as a kumu. So sacred knowledge lives in the body of the trained practitioner, not in software. So this distinction matters because one can guide a student and the other one can only imitate.
What is your view of how the teachings could be transmitted to other generations?
Definitely live with a real kumu through Zoom in digital platforms. And that is even poo-pooed on these days because, of course, we love to be in community with one another and in person. And some translation does need further clarification. I can tell you, teaching a warrior art of our people is difficult. It is. But there are so many haumana out there that are spread out in the diaspora and non-Hawaiians that are learning Lua because they are worthy of learning Lua because of their integrity and respect. They are making headway through the digital space and they get to see me once or twice a year. And I'm very impressed with them. Although, Leon, I do have to say, it's different when you're in person. The body gets to feel and learn it, and then the mind catches up, right? In a digital platform, you actually have to use your mind first, then the body catches up. So it's changed the way in which we are teaching these sacred traditions and the way that we're learning them.
You mentioned that culture is increasingly being a performance rather than being carried or passed on. Can you explain what you mean by that?
To carry culture means we have obligations to it. We have teachers, standards, protocols, discipline, correction, and service. To perform culture often means presenting selected pieces of it for attention, applause, branding, and consumption. So these are two very different things. Someone can wear the symbols, speak a few words properly, use sacred imagery, and appear powerfully online. But carrying culture means that knowledge has shaped your life, your conduct, and your responsibilities. So our traditions were never meant to be costumes. They were meant to be lived.
How do we prevent the misuse of our sacred knowledge, our traditions?
There are rightful gatekeepers in the attempt to try to ensure that the information is passed to those that are worthy and that will continue to protect it, educate, and perpetuate it. It is different for every lineage and every sacred tradition. I don't tend to use cultural practices. It makes it sound like the ways of our ancients were hobbies. So I tend to use sacred traditions if anyone is wondering. I think the responsible thing is to use AI as a support and not as an authority. If we're going to ask questions of it, use it for certain capabilities, we need to make sure that we are the creators and we're the authors, and we are also entering it into AI in the way that we're not divulging too much. So this means that transcribing and archiving, organizing materials that I've already taught, editing for clarity, preserving historical records, and things like that don't violate protocol. I think that's a wise use of technology because let's face it, our kupuna would use technology like we are right now for this interview if they were here. We are them now and we must evolve. So while technology across the board can assist with the transmission of what has already been lived is fine. That's fine. but it cannot replace the living source of that transmission. That for me is a firm line.
Mahalo for this wisdom and for a path for us to learn from.
Napu Alikoa Wahine, Hawaiian women warriors, were highly trained combatants and strategic leaders in traditional Hawaii. They fought alongside men to defend the nation and to defend the islands. Despite this, their highly significant and influential roles, they've often been dismissed, overlooked, or erased altogether from history due to internalized colonialism, as well as the adoption of Western patriarchal narratives that overlook female heroism. To tell us more, we go now to Adam Kiave Manalo Camp, Kanaka Owiwi, a native Hawaiian author and historian. Aloha mai kaua e Adam Kiave.
Mahalo, Kumihina.
I just wanted to start us off by talking about wahine and the role of wahine, especially our koa wahine, or our women warriors. And in some instances, it's almost as if our wahine, our koa wahine, have been discounted and ignored, not just by outsiders, but also possibly by our own Hawaiian men. Why do you think that might be so?
Part of the answer is archival. Colonial writers, missionary writers, and even Hawaiians who had converted to Christianity and wrote our history often recognized Hawaiian women when they looked at like queens and converts or as curiosities, but they were less willing to center Hawaiian women as military actors, as political thinkers, or intellectual authorities. That selective recording shaped later our public memory of our koa wahine. And I think also a second part to that is ideological. Western patriarchy naturalized the assumption that war, ruling, governing, and public authority belonged to men. Once that framework entered our schools, our churches, our museums, and our popular histories, even some Kanaka began repeating it back as if it were tradition and truth. But there is also, I believe, an internal Hawaiian dimension. Some Hawaiian men, including in some of our aloha aina and cultural spaces, has sometimes leaned on an overly simplified masculine image of the past. That strong male warrior, the male chief, the male protector. That image can be emotionally powerful, especially under conditions of dispossession, but it can also narrow our history. And when people are trying to recover dignity after colonization, they sometimes recover only the forms of power colonialism taught them to recognize.
Adam, the thought that Kamehameha I included koa wahine in his regiments, and that koa wahine were present in battle and fought alongside their kane, such as in the Battle of Kumu. What are your thoughts about this?
That's a great question, and that's something that we don't talk often enough about. When Kamehameha I was completing the unification of the Hawaiian Islands, there were women. There were women on his war canoes. There were women in his ranks. Kahumanu herself fought with Kamehameha during these battles. And during the Battle of the Pali, we have, if you go to the Ni'ubanu Pali on the right side, there's literally the graves of 12 Hawaiian women who fought at the Battle of the Pali, right there, buried right by the Pali, 12 of them. So it's not just anecdotal. We have actual evidence. We have the EV that confirms that these women participated in warfare. And in the Battle of Kuamo'o, yes, we have the most famous example is Manono, who fought alongside her husband to preserve the Hawaiian way of life. So this is attested through our oral history, through our written history, through our EV, through weapons and through our worldview.
In our history, Adam, we know from what is written that there are indeed significant and quite prominent wahine that have played instrumental roles in our history, in our culture, in language preservation. Would you mind sharing with us some of these prominent wahine that come to mind when you think of koa wahine, not just on the battlefield, not just fighting to the death next to their kane, but koa wahine who fought with skill, intelligence, and with great wit?
All too often, how we write about Hawaiian history in regards to just even the titles of women, like we often use the title of chiefess, right? I'm sure you've heard of that. But like for me, I prefer the term female chief or li'iwahine because chiefess can imply that she held the rank due to being married to a chief instead of holding status on her own. And that's important to recognize that Hawaiian women held ranks on their own, not because they were married into someone's family, not because of who their children were, but because of their own ranking. They had their own kulana within Hawaiian society that we need to reassert that. But like some of the wahine in our history that I think we should recognize, there's a lot actually that we should recognize. So I mentioned earlier Manono, who fought with her husband, who fought with her kane, Ke Kua Kolani, at the Battle of Kumu, and she was not just a warrior, but she was a witness to a profound turning point in our history. There's, of course, our Queen Liliuokalani, who also represents another kind of koa wahine. The koa wahine who was learned in the Constitution, in the Law of Nations, who was a poet, who was a composer, who was an intellectual. Now, as the last sovereign of Hawaii, she defended our lahui through public persuasion, international appeal, through the written word, and her refusal to normalize the overthrow. And of course, worldwide, Aloha Oi, her composition is probably the most famous Hawaiian medley ever known. Then we also have figures like Emma Navahi, who belongs to that same lineage of political struggle. After the overthrow, she was active in the women's patriotic movement. She was tied to Aloha Aina Ona Wahine, Hui Aloha Aina Ona Wahine, and she sustained the Ke Aloha Aina newspaper after her husband's passing. And she was also active in the Hawaiian homeland's homesteading debates that happened during the territorial period, and she was a host to Roosevelt when he came to Hawaii. We also have figures such as Iolani Luahine and Mary Kawena Pukui, who shows us another form of koa wahine in terms of cultural memory, right? Luahine became one of the foremost cultural practitioners of hula and oli, and Mary Kawena Pukui, through her work in language, translation, collecting, writing, and recording kupuna, became foundational to modern Hawaiian studies itself and to the Hawaiian Renaissance that would emerge in the 1970s. So there's those women, but there's also the women such as Kahumanu, Keapualani, Bernice Puahi, Princess Bernice Puahi, Princess Ruth Ke'elikolani, Abigail Ku'aihelani Campbell, and so many others. So Hawaiian history, we need to remember, is not just a story of a few exceptional women floating around the male narrative. It is a history in which women repeatedly governed, resisted, endowed institutions, defended our language, shaped diplomacy, and held the nation together in pivotal moments of change.
Yes, indeed, Adam. And I can think of a few of our modern current times koa wahine whom have led, whom have served. They include names like Dr. Lilikala Kamalehua, Dr. Honani K. Trask, Mililani Trask. These names have great resonance within our community.
Our history is incomplete unless we include the histories of our women, the histories of our mahu, and we need to imagine leadership as not just being naturally male, that courage was primarily male, that warriors are primarily male, and that cultural transmission was somehow secondary to politics and warfare. In reality, Hawaiian women were often doing all three at once, leading, resisting, and transmitting our ike. And restoring them to the center is not just an act of charity, it is an act of historical correction and empowering our lahui. When we have strong women, we have a strong lahui. But there's also another like practical political lesson in there. A people under occupation, under militarization, and facing colonial cultural pressure cannot afford to have a shallow memory. We need young Kanaka to remember the fighting spirit of Manono, of Liliuokalani, of Emma Navahi, of Iolani Luahine, of Mary Kavena Pukui, of Haunani K. Trask, of Lilia Kala. All of those important women, you need to remember them as leaders, not as decorative herons, but as leaders of power. Because without them, where would we be? These women helped lead our country, our lahui, forward when we were lost.
No leila mahalo anui ia oi Adam Kiave ki kipa ana mai ia mahakoi ke ia la.
Still to come on Free Hawaii News. Progress for Hawaii at the United Nations.
There are many factors that stand in the way of restoring the Hawaiian Kingdom as a sovereign nation. The biggest obstacle to overcome is the 133 years of indoctrination and illegal occupation by the United States. Then there's the fear of the unknown, or better put, the comfort of the status quo, even if it's illegal and oppressive. Even many of those who know that the so-called overthrow, annexation, and statehood were illegal have come to regard the U.S. occupation of the Hawaiian Islands as so entrenched that restoring the Hawaiian Kingdom as an independent nation seems unrealistic or impossible or too scary. The status quo, ingrained habits, complacency and fatalism, and the Stockholm Syndrome, where kidnapped people identify themselves with their captors, are difficult attitudes to overcome. People who think they cannot be free do not aspire to be free. But gaining independence is not impossible. In fact, over the past 80 years, it has become commonplace. The UN was founded in 1945 by 51 countries. Today, it has 193 member countries. That is a gain of 152 countries. Roughly 100 of those had been colonies or possessions of occupied territories of another country. At this point in world affairs, international policies stress that peoples and nations have the right to self-determination. It is enshrined in the United Nations Charter, and the UN maintains several mechanisms and agencies that promote self-determination and self-governance as exercised in various forms of autonomy and independence. One thing we have learned over the years in observing the emergence of independent countries is that there are many variations of how independence was achieved. Some have been traumatic, but most have been peaceful and orderly. So what about Hawaii? What happens when we succeed in exposing the fraudulent claim of dominion by the United States and begin to transition back to independence. We have some obstacles of misconceptions to overcome there as well. The biggest one is that people think we have to create a new country starting from scratch. But there is no need to create a new country when a perfectly good and lawful one, the Hawaiian Kingdom, continues to exist. Although it has been greatly impaired by suppression and layers of fraud, abuse, and pillaging, the sovereignty of the Hawaiian Kingdom was never lawfully extinguished. Therefore, there is no reason to contrive a new government to replace the U.S. and the state of Hawaii unless the people, the lawful subjects or citizens or nationals of the Hawaiian Kingdom, called Hawaiian nationals, decide they want to alter or change their government. No one other than Hawaiian nationals can make that determination, not the U.S. government or U.S. citizens or other foreign citizens residing in Hawaii, or the state of Hawaii, or the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, or even well-intentioned independence factions. Because the Hawaiian Kingdom is in continuity, there is no lawful way to alter or replace that existing government except through the processes provided in that existing lawful constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Prior to the Hawaiian Kingdom being taken over by insurgents during the illegal invasion in 1893, Hawaii had already been functioning for decades as a nation-state under one of the best constitutions in the world. As a result, Hawaii developed laws that created one of the most progressive and enlightened countries in the world, fully Hawaiian, yet of international stature, and engaged in trade and discourse with many other nations. The United States' prolonged occupation does not change the fact that the constitutional government of the Hawaiian Kingdom, the one in place from 1810 to 1893, is still the one and only lawful and indisputable government for the Hawaiian Islands. The United States is a usurper and has no lawful jurisdiction in Hawaii. Since the Hawaiian Kingdom was never extinguished, its constitution, its laws, statutes, and policies are still intact. Hawaii needs only to assemble the people, the Hawaiian nationals, and revive the mechanisms of the government to assert its proper independent status as a sovereign country. Therefore, any attempt to create a new constitution, new laws, or a new government for the Hawaiian Islands, contrary to the still existent lawful Hawaiian Kingdom, would literally be an act of treason, just as treasonous as the self-proclaimed Republic of Hawaii was in 1894, the fake annexation in 1897, the creation of the fake territory of Hawaii in 1900, and the current so-called State of Hawaii of 1959. To create a new constitution or any other form of government other than that prescribed in the still existing constitutions for the Hawaiian Islands, no matter how well intentioned, would be in direct violation of the sovereignty of the Hawaiian Kingdom and in breach of international laws. So, what about infrastructure? Again, there is no lawful basis to start from scratch. Think of the restoration of the Hawaiian Kingdom as a change of management. Everything in the Hawaiian Islands would operate just as before, only it would be under the lawful jurisdiction of the Hawaiian Kingdom instead of the fraudulent state of Hawaii. All infrastructure and capital improvements would come under the new management of the Hawaiian Kingdom. This will provide Hawaiians agency to make our own decisions and to run Hawaii as we see fit. Recent examples of this type of peaceful, orderly change of management transitions are Hong Kong from Great Britain to China, the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania from the USSR to independence, the trust territories of the Pacific, Micronesia, Marshall Islands, Palau, from the U.S. trusteeship to independence, and so forth. Today, American Samoa, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico are all engaged in self-determination, where independence from the U.S. would be an option. So, with the support of the United Nations, international law, and the international community to start the ball rolling, we are in a position to usher in the return of the Hawaiian Kingdom as a sovereign, independent nation.
Mahalo anui ia'u kou e nā hoa kipa, ua hiki mai noho I kākou I ke ia mahele noho I o ko kākou polokalamu o ia no o Kumu Hinaʻs mana'o. For this evening, I'd like to take you on a little bit of a walk, and I recall last month's Merry Monarch festivities, the celebration, and I cannot help but consider just the flurry of memories that just surrounded me as I sat in the audience. And of course, I sat in the second row behind the judges, and I watched on the night of Ho'ike, where in this, the 50th anniversary of the Merry Monarch hula celebration, that it was the Kane halau that initiated this great celebration and what is now noted as one of the hallmarks, one of the highlights of every year in so many lives of people who dance hula here in the homeland. And I saw that night, on Ho'ike night, I saw so many of the original dancers of halau, like halau na Kamalehua o Lililehua, the men of Waimapuna, and Kekai o Kahiki, these halau names that come to us, some from that time and some emerging from that time. I saw dancers of every generation on the stage, and I just reflect that in the last 50 years, we have seen Hawaiian culture go from a place that was a place of being shunned, a place of being disregarded, a place of being tokenized, a place of being marginalized. And when we look back in our own history, in time, at the turn of the century, from the 19th to the 20th century, we know our history had finally come to see where foreigners would ban our language. And this, for me personally, was during the time of my great-grandparents. And the banning of language would ensure that the next generations would be so completely out of touch, even though it may not have seemed that way. But it meant that our people were out of touch with so many things. And when it comes to hula, we must only be grateful that King David Kalakaua ensured that while hula went underground and was done more in secrecy because it was not approved, it was not supported, but King David Kalakaua being known and credited for resurrecting these practices that were once put down by Christian missionaries. Seeing the halau for some of those gentlemen, some in their 80s, many in their 70s and 60s and 50s, and the older Kane dancing up there brought back so many memories of watching hula when I was young. And I had tears in so many moments when I saw them because they still didn't miss a beat. And I saw the generations gather, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to bring it up in this evening's Kumu Hinaʻs mana'o, because I hope that the Kane halau that came together for this reunion of sorts would continue in this sense of fellowship, and that one day, on a different level, a national level, of dancing hula, that we would see where hula lineages, where they come back to gather around the parent halau and the understandings of those founding parents, those founding elders of hula lines. I hope that they continue in their fellowship, and I hope that the elder will continue to foster the younger, and the younger would create opportunity and space to always make sure they honor the elders who paved the way. A call to action, if you would. If you have not yet availed yourself to learning more about our culture, hula is but one way. It is one doorway to access, to have that relationship. I encourage each and every one of you, my fellow Kanaka, to develop a relationship with some element, some aspect of our culture, even if it's not hula. There are so many things to do, and even if it means that you perhaps get out there and be on the land, that is where our people belong, and that's up to us to take that initiative and learn and gain that familiarity with what will contribute to us thinking, doing, and feeling in the way of Kanaka, in the worldview or through the lens of being Kanaka. No leila e kia naina o ke hui ana, mahalo anu ia oko, no ko oko ho'onenea ana mai.
Mahalo nui for joining us for this episode of Free Hawaii News. It's been a pleasure to be here, as well as a pleasure to be speaking with our various guests who share their wonderful ike.
No leila e kia naina o ko kako ulauna ana, mahalo anu i ke hui ana, a hui ho kako, aloha.
We hope you enjoyed this month's episode of Free Hawaii News. Mahalo for watching. There's a new show every month, so this program will air several more times this month. You can view it anytime on Olelo's on-demand site or on YouTube. See you next time. Ahui ho, aloha aina.
Free Hawaii, broadcasting